I am a former Army interrogator, human intelligence collector. I was trained by the United States government to analyze your language, body language, posture to identify deception. I did it in the real world through interrogations, through source operations, and through strategic debriefings. I've got tons of certifications. I'm an expert at this.
You guys get ready to leave out of there, getting towed out.
Yeah.
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, Nolan was, the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
Last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. That is critically important information. All right, right here, he's talking about when his buddy Bart pulls out his buddy Wyatt's boat. So Bart is on one boat and he's pulling out Wyatt's boat. Wyatt's boat is the one that you've heard about was taken on water and sinking, and that's why they had to leave Horn Island. I want you to pay attention to this.
To where we're out of all this, all this chaos, because we left at 4:30 and there was still.
We left at 4:30. We left at 4:30. This guy just said that the last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. Very specific time. Now, how did he know it was 3 o'clock? Brandon Tatum didn't ask him that. If this was an interrogation, that's a key question I would ask. How do you know it was 3 o'clock?
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, Nolan was, the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock.
And Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie. Katie.
That's Katie McCormick that he's talking about. Katie McCormick said that's not true, but let's listen. This is at 3 o'clock. This happened at 3 o'clock.
And Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing. That was the last time I laid eyes on him. But when we were leaving,
when we were leaving, so it would be 4:30, because he's already said we were leaving at 4:30.
Nolan was sitting by the boat.
Nolan was sitting by the boat. How do you know, Warren, that Nolan was sitting by the boat? The last time you laid eyes on him was at 3 o'clock. It's now 4:30. This is your timeline. Timeline is everything. At this part of the story, he's at 4:30. But he just said less than a minute ago, 2 minutes ago, that the last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and
how do you know that? The last time you laid eyes, your exact words, on him was 3 o'clock. You're now talking about 4:30. Now listen what happens next.
My buddy yelled for Nolan, get on the boat. We're leaving.
Now, in the interest of honest analysis here, if they were both on the boat and he heard his buddy yelling at Nolan, not him, by the way. Warren wasn't yelling at Nolan. Even in his own story, he wasn't looking for Nolan or yelling for Nolan. And in the beginning of part 1 of the interview, he says, Nolan was like a brother to me. He was my best friend. More than a friend, though. He was like a brother to me. But Warren's not the one looking for Nolan, not the one yelling for Nolan. He don't even go over and lay eyes on him again, according to his own story that he's telling us. But he hears his buddy saying, hey, Nolan.
The boat's having issues. And no, he didn't say that, but he was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat. And Nolan said, no, I'm staying out here. I'm going to ride in with somebody else. And it's not uncommon to hear. It's not like my buddy asked him one time. My buddy asked Nolan multiple times to get.
So your buddy asked Nolan multiple times and you never did. Your brother, your best friend. But notice he didn't say Nolan said, I'm going to stay here with Katie who I'm sitting with next to the boat. No part of that exchange would have given Warren the details to know that Nolan was sitting by the boat with Katie, which was his exact words. He contradicted himself. That's blatant deception. It needs to be immediately exploited and interrogated.
At 4:31 in the afternoon on July 4th, a boat pulled away from Horn Island, Mississippi, carrying 6 friends back home after a holiday on the water. 18-year-old Nolan Wells was not among them. 2 days later, a park ranger found Nolan in the same waters where he had been swimming earlier that day. What happened during the roughly 90 minutes before that boat left the island has been examined by investigators, Nolan's family, and millions of people online. But there is one detail that almost everyone seems to have missed. Buried inside an interview that was meant to explain the situation and defend Nolan's friends, One of the people closest to him made a statement that appears difficult to reconcile with another version of events. Not once, but twice. And those two versions cannot both be completely accurate. Before we get into that, I want to say something directly because the numbers tell us that many of you watching these videos still haven't joined the community. We have far more people watching than we have people subscribed, and if you want the next update on this case as soon as it drops instead of discovering it days later in your recommended feed, subscribing is the easiest way to stay with us. It costs nothing, takes just a few seconds, and genuinely helps a small channel continue covering a story that larger networks may move away from. Now let's get into it. Before we examine the boat, the timeline, and the interview clip that has been dissected online, it's worth understanding why Nolan Wells' case became a national story so quickly. This was a case that seemed to contain almost every element capable of pushing a local investigation into the national spotlight. An 18-year-old with a promising future, a grieving family looking for answers, a friend group whose public accounts have been questioned and, in some places, appear inconsistent, and a growing collection of viral claims ranging from credible information to material that has not been independently verified. Add prominent public figures using their platforms to draw attention to the case, and the story quickly grew far beyond its original local scope. That attention is not necessarily a bad thing. Nolan's family deserves serious attention on the question of what happened to him. But the larger a case becomes, the harder it can be to separate verified information from speculation. There are more rumors, more people interpreting the same evidence differently, more pressure on investigators and witnesses, and more incentive for online creators to exaggerate details simply because controversy generates attention. Everyone involved, Nolan's family, his friends, investigators, and the media, is now operating under a level of public scrutiny that most people will never experience, especially while dealing with grief. And before we reduce Nolan to a timeline, a phone, a boat, or a collection of disputed statements, we need to remember who he actually was. Somewhere along the way, the internet turned a real teenager into a case file and a debate. We're not going to do that here. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He had recently graduated from Ocean Springs High School, and according to the people who actually knew him, he was a young man with a promising future. He played football and had started the recruitment and enrollment process at Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he planned to continue playing. Friends described him as big-hearted and someone who made people feel noticed. He may not have been the loudest person in the room, but he was the kind of person who remembered your name and asked how you were doing. The night before July 4th, Nolan cooked salmon for his parents. His mother, Christine Wansley, has described that evening in multiple interviews. Nolan hugged her, told her he loved her, and then left to spend the night at a friend's house before the holiday trip. That ordinary goodbye became the last time she saw her son in person. There was nothing about it that suggested something terrible was about to happen. It was simply a normal moment between a mother and her son, the kind of moment families experience every day without imagining it could be the last. The following morning, July 4th, Nolan headed toward Horn Island with a group of friends. Horn Island is a barrier island roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast and is accessible by private boat. There are no major buildings, limited cell service, and on a holiday weekend, hundreds of people can be out on the surrounding water doing exactly what Nolan's group had planned to do: spend the day together and celebrate. According to multiple accounts we'll examine in detail, Nolan was last seen wearing blue swim trunks, no shirt, and sunglasses pushed up on his head. He was described as energetic and social, someone whose presence could make an afternoon better simply by being there. That is the person we need to remember as we move into the disputed timeline. Because from this point forward, the story becomes complicated, contested, and increasingly difficult to separate from the arguments happening online. There have been endless debates about the timeline, the boat, Nolan's phone, and what different people have said. But beneath all of those arguments is still an 18-year-old who cooked dinner for his parents shortly before leaving for what was supposed to be an ordinary holiday trip. He never came home. That is the part of this story that does not depend on a theory, a rumor, or a disputed interpretation. Whatever ultimately happened during those final hours, Nolan Wells was a real person whose family is still looking for answers.
was like a brother to me. Nolan lit up every room he walked in. 4th of July, everybody was out there. Nolan rode out on the Triton, and then we had a Palm Beach, 18 Palm Beach. There was 4 guys on that. The rest of the group, which was ranged from maybe 10 to 15 or 16 people on my buddy's tide line.
Yeah, so y'all pretty much having a good time. And then you guys get ready to leave prematurely.
Right.
And like, what? Explain that, because you guys got there around 10.
Yeah.
It's now 4:30.
Right.
People are still out there partying and
Correct.
they're having a good time, but something happened to where it necessitated you guys to get the boat up and running. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So I had a girl come up to me and say, "Hey, your brother just got in a fight." And obviously I have a younger brother, and that's who she was talking about. And I was freaked out. So I walked over to the beach, and I didn't walk over, I ran over. I made a beeline, I didn't talk to anybody, put my drink down and walked over there. And my brother was kind of angry, and there was a lot going on, but someone was getting pulled away. I don't know who it was. And my brother was like, "Oh, I just got in a fight, and this guy punched me in the face," and I punched him right back. And then went to the ground, and my brother put him in an arm bar. And
was Nolan involved in any of this?
Absolutely not. When I was over there was a bunch of younger guys like my brother's age, and I mean, Nolan, I never saw Nolan over there.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And okay, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
So you get ready to go. There's an issue with the boat.
Okay, yeah.
And this is
Well,
what
this led up to that. That's what I was saying.
So the fight happened with your brother, or a little scuffle. I'm assuming that it was cleared up.
You're right.
You got your brother out of that situation, and then how did you find out that this boat is sinking?
Well, I walk back over, and like we're probably around each other for a little bit. I mean, I wasn't thinking anything about it. I told my brother, I pulled my brother off the beach, and I was just like, "Listen, get in the water, hang out with us, calm down." I mean, he was calm, but I didn't want anything else to happen, And so once I got back over to the boat, I got on the Triton, and the Triton had probably about 6 inches of water up to the transom. And I was freaked out because I'm good friends with Wyatt, and that was his boat. And, no water's coming out, no access water's coming out. And it was a big issue, because I think the reason was because there were so many people getting on and off the boat, and at some point the boat was very, very crowded, and there was just a lot of people on, so that it drags water in. And eventually, I think over time, we were out there for a couple hours, the boat just started filling up with water. So I popped the starboard side hatch, and the battery was completely underwater. And so the motor wouldn't trim down. I mean, my buddy would go to trim it down from the console, and it'd trim down, and then it'd come right back up. And so Wyatt's trying to throw a rear anchor, so we're caught, and he's, yelling at people. Everybody's kind of freaking out. And eventually, I'm like yelling at other people, trying to tell them, calm down, like, the boat could possibly sink, and I'm not paying attention to everyone around me. I was paying attention to my buddy's boat. And that's what all my other friends that were on that boat were doing, trying to solve the problem.
So you're on the boat now, the water is getting up to the point where the boat may be disabled to where you couldn't get it out from Horn Island. So what happens after that?
Wyatt jumps to the water, tries to throw a rear anchor, and my buddy Meyer, you're sitting, looking, trying to pull trash out the bilge. And the bilge is basically a pump that pulls the access water out the boat. So the bilge was failing to work. So any excess water was just sitting in the boat. It wasn't getting pumped out. And I looked over the gunnel, and I looked at the release hole for the bilge, and it was even with the water. So, I mean, we're all freaking out. All of our, we're not focused on anything else other than the boat. Well, then eventually my buddy Bart on the tide line is like, I'm going to pull y'all out to where we're out of all this, all this chaos. Because we left at 4:30 and there were still just as many people there, if not more than when we got there. I mean, probably around the same amount. I mean, it was crazy. Like, there was a lot of people. And I mean, eventually Bart pulls us out. You know, we left at 4:30, but we really weren't pulled out away from everybody. We were probably about a quarter mile out, and we had the towing strap pulled from, you know, Bart's port side cleat or starboard side cleat, and he was on our starboard side bow. And so it was rubbing on his power pole. So Bart turned around, pulled up next to our boat, and we were just trying to get it situated. So that's when Wyatt called Cito. And Wyatt was like, you know, calls him, because the cell service isn't great at the island, but once you can use your phone, but stuff might not descend, and it's not great. You know, you got maybe one bar, it won't work that well. But once you get a little off the island, you have cell coverage. And even on the island, like I called my mom when we were on the island, you know, it was fine. Like we had, you know, enough cell coverage to make a phone call or shoot a text over, but you don't have enough cell coverage to like send a picture, for example. So Wyatt.
So I want to go back.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I want to touch on that real quick, because the phone thing came up at some point.
Uh-huh.
And so was it when you guys got off the boat?
Yeah.
I mean, were people taking their phones off the boat, or is that not typical? Because I know that Nolan's phone was left on the boat,
Right.
even though, you know, after you guys had left. So can you explain that? Because I think people need to understand this a little clearer.
Yeah.
Was it typical for people to have their phones left on boats, or did they keep their phones in the water? Or?
Yeah. I mean, everybody kind of goes out to the island to get away from, you know, their phones and everything else. I know I got on the boat to get away from, you know, just the regular world. And no, when you're waist deep in water, no one's carrying their phone in their hand. Especially at Horn Island, the water has been very, very murky because of the rain. And when it's just very risky. If you're gonna have your phone in the water, you know, some people might for a couple minutes and like maybe taking some pictures of each other. You know, I know a lot of girls like to take pictures in the water at Horn Island. You know, guys do too. You know, like people like to take pictures, and but a lot of the pictures you see are on the boat for a reason. And so, no, I mean, if someone is on their phone in the water, they're using it real quick and then putting it right back on the boat. We were all waist deep in water. No one's sitting there scrolling on their phone. I never saw that once. And I've never seen that once. And I've been out the Highland my whole life. I mean, that's just not something people do. People aren't on their phones. And everybody has their phone, yes, but it's always on the boat. No one's getting off the boat with their phone. So.
And so you guys get ready to leave out of there, getting towed out.
Yeah.
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, the last time I saw Nolan was 3:00, and Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie, Katie. And Katie, Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing, and I was like, dude, you crazy. I was like just joking with him. And, but anyway, Nolan, that was the last time I laid eyes on him. But when we were leaving, obviously, no one is getting left at the island that came with us unless they demanded to, you know, be there and asked, you know. This is a very common thing at Horn Island. When you're out there, a lot of people ride out there with someone and in with somebody else all the time. I've done that 100 times. You know, it's a very common thing. But Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and my buddy yelled for Nolan, get on the boat. We're leaving. The boat's having issues. And like, no, he didn't say that, but he was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat. And Nolan said, no, I'm staying out here. I'm going to ride in with somebody else. And it's not uncommon to hear, but it's not like my buddy asked him one time. My buddy asked Nolan multiple times to get on the boat. Nolan, get on the boat. Get on the boat. We're leaving. If you're coming, you got to come now. And Nolan made a decision to stay out on the island. And like he said, you know.
How many people heard that? Were there just
at least
just a
5
few, or?
I mean, everyone that was on our boat right there, because the Palm Beach had already left. My buddy went ahead and went home on the Palm Beach, and 3 guys on the way back. And Nolan wasn't the only person to ride out there with us and in with somebody else. I mean, we had multiple people in our group that rowed out with us and rowed in on someone else's boat. And that, like I said, that's not an uncommon thing to do, you know? I mean, a lot of people do that. I could name probably 50 people out there that day that ran out with somebody and ran back in with somebody else. So, I mean, it's not like it's an uncommon thing, but it's not like we just left him there or my friends just left him there. Nolan made a decision to stay on the island after my friends asked him multiple times and told him to get on the boat, and he decided to stay.
And I heard the girl that he was with, Katie, had text somebody that she heard people yelling
for
Nolan to get on it. Is that true?
And I have a picture of that. She texted my buddy, and the next day everybody was panicking and everybody's texting Katie, you know, because she was obviously seen with Nolan the whole day at the island. Katie sent a message to my buddy the next day and said, you know, this is the last time I saw him, you know, he's really sweet. But she also mentioned that the last time she saw Nolan was when my buddy was yelling at him to get on the boat. And she was right there to see that Nolan decided not to.
Yeah, and so you guys get in the boat, you start to get towed in, and you make it back. Now, explain how did you get to the point where you were concerned about Nolan? Because obviously you said, hey, Nolan, y'all need to, or somebody, not
when
you,
did I get
but
to that point?
You guys had made mention Nolan needed to get on a boat.
Yeah.
He didn't.
Yeah.
You guys get back to wherever you're going.
Right.
Explain that. Did you guys go back to somebody's house, or you guys like what happened there? And then when did you feel like, well, wait a minute, where's Nolan?
Right. Okay. Well, running in was very chaotic. I mean, Nolan chose to stay on the island, so my focus wasn't on anything else other than the boat, you know, because if the boat doesn't get in, then no one gets in. You know, I don't want to sneak out there on my buddy's boat, and no one does. But my buddy Wyatt jumped out and pulled the plug on the boat once we kind of got out there, because he got the motor to trim down. And the motor trimmed down, my buddy Wyatt pulled the plug, and we planed off. We moved all the weight to the front of the boat so we could plane off. And eventually we planed off, and the boat was running. So when you're planed off and you have water in the boat and you're hauling, you know, we're going pretty fast. We're going probably 40, 42 miles an hour. And so all that excess water that was built up in the boat is coming out of the boat. So, I mean, that's what we had to do. So we ran into Fort Bayou, and we didn't just run straight to my buddy's grandparents' house. We ran into Fort Bayou. A couple of us jumped in the water, and Wyatt, like, the whole reason for the stop was so Wyatt could hop in and put the plug back in the boat. So then after that, we went and docked it, and I went back to my buddy's house, and we ate and, you know, napped for a little bit. It was a long day at the island, so, you know, we were all tired. And eventually we go over to a girlfriend of mine. She was having people over for 4th of July. We were doing like fireworks and stuff. So we all went over there to swim and, you know, hang out. And
this infamous picture that I've seen online of Nolan in the water in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Where is this picture associated with? Because you said you guys went back to swim. Nolan wasn't with you.
Yeah.
So where's this picture at?
People who knew Nolan have described a very specific kind of personality, and what makes those descriptions notable is how consistently they appear across people who were not necessarily repeating the same story for the cameras. His best friend, Javon Williams, described Nolan in an on-record interview with the Biloxi Sun-Herald as someone who had a consistent pattern throughout the years they knew each other. If Nolan went somewhere with you, he came back with you. Williams repeated essentially the same point independently to CNN, saying that this was something Nolan had done every time. We'll come back to why that detail matters, because it directly relates to one of the most disputed parts of the timeline, the claim that Nolan simply decided to stay behind while his friends left the island. Teachers also contacted Nolan's family after his death and shared their memories of him, while classmates and teammates described a young man who showed up early, supported the people around him, and appeared to have a clear direction for his future. His football teammates from high school and his brief time at the college level described someone whose life seemed to be moving forward. He had plans, a place on a roster, and parents who expected to watch him continue playing college football. None of that makes Nolan perfect, and no honest account of this case should turn him into either a saint or a fictional mystery. It simply gives us a clearer picture of an ordinary 18-year-old whose life was moving in a direction his family and friends expected. And that is important because understanding who Nolan was helps us evaluate the claims about what he may or may not have done that afternoon. So now, let's build the timeline the same way investigators have had to build it, piece by piece, using GPS data, dispatch audio, witness statements, and accounts from Nolan's family. Throughout this timeline, we need to keep one distinction clear. Documented evidence and statements from people involved are not the same thing. Mixing the two is one of the main reasons this case has become so difficult to follow online. According to GPS data obtained by CBS News and the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the boat carrying Nolan and his friends left the dock at approximately 9:56 that morning and arrived at Horn Island around 11:14. Those portions of the timeline are documented. The afternoon itself appears to have been typical of a busy July 4th on that part of the Mississippi coast, with boats anchored nearby and large numbers of people gathering on the island. Multiple reports have estimated that more than 200 people were present that day. Somewhere during the afternoon, according to the family's account, Nolan met a young woman named Katie, whose name later became public through statements from her own family. We'll examine Katie's account in greater detail later, but for now, the relevant point is that Nolan spent part of the afternoon with her. Then, sometime in the middle of the afternoon, the boat Nolan and his friends had arrived on developed a mechanical problem. According to statements from a parent of one of the friends, along with dispatch audio later obtained by NBC News through a public records request, the boat's bilge pump failed and the vessel began taking on water. The dispatch recording is documented evidence, and it captures the boat operator requesting towing assistance. GPS records show that the boat ultimately left Horn Island at approximately 4:31 that afternoon. And this is where the timeline becomes much more complicated. Nolan was not on that boat when it departed. According to statements from 3 friends who were there and later spoke with investigators, Nolan chose to remain on the island and planned to return to the mainland later, reportedly with another group that may have been connected to Katie and the people she arrived with. That is the account the friend group has provided. But Nolan's mother has disputed important parts of that version, and the disagreement is not simply about a general impression. It concerns specific questions about what Nolan intended to do, who he was with, and what was communicated before the boat left. Those are details that, in theory, should be possible to establish by comparing witness accounts, records, and the timing of events. Later that night, at around 11 p.m., one of Nolan's friends contacted the Coast Guard, while Christine Wansley reported her son missing to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. By that point, the question was no longer simply why Nolan had remained behind. The larger question was what happened during the hours between the boat's departure and the beginning of the search for him.
Nolan Wells, death threats are flying. One actually says there's going to be blood, so much blood. Another death threat says don't go outside. How can anybody do their jobs when they're getting death threats? Not only that, we understand this case is headed to a grand jury. We also learned tonight that the state's autopsy is complete, but is being kept secret. Isn't an autopsy a public document? Why is it being kept hidden from us, the public? What is in that autopsy, the first autopsy of Nolan Wells?
Young lady Katie that he was hanging out with. I saw a text message from her alluding to the fact that she never saw him get on that boat at all. They could have been saying don't die or is it dead, referring to the bilge pump. Somebody would have seen something if there was a dramatic commotion like this occurring on that boat.
I hope Nolan Wells died by accident. I'm not shutting down our Crime Stories investigation until I know.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can you all please come? We have a membership. Hey, up! Shut the f*** up! What'd you say?
You know, if that sound is real, there's no getting away from that. And all this business about there's no connection, well, I listened to a good 40 seconds of Ceto, S-E-A, second word T-O-W, on hold, listen to their music. There was plenty good connection, but before I can even get to the death threats of blood, so much blood everywhere, and don't step outside, and more, before I can even get to the grand jury, before I can get to the autopsy that's being kept hidden from us, I want you to meet someone very important, critical to this investigation. Her name, Janetta Brantley. Miss Brantley is the audio engineer who enhanced the 911 call, the Ceto call, in the Nolan Wells case. So everybody claiming some ding-dong on YouTube did it, or somebody on Insta or TikTok did it, no. She did it. I've spoken to her. I've read her statement. I want you to judge her credibility. Credibility is normally the sole province of a jury, and tonight you serve in that function. Miss Brantley, I'm sure that you're getting all sorts of abuse, threats, and so forth. It's a cacophony that seemingly won't cease. That said, thank you for being with us tonight. Explain to me where you got the audio, how you got the audio, and what, if anything, you did to enhance the audio.
First and foremost, I basically downloaded it off of YouTube from WLOX News's YouTube site. And when I downloaded it, I ripped it off of YouTube. That's the terminology that we use when we take something off of YouTube. But when I ripped it off of YouTube and I pulled it in.
Pause, please. Objection. Miss Brantley, isn't it true that the audio you got was taken directly by XLO from MDMR, correct? The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Okay, please continue, Miss Brantley.
So when I downloaded it from YouTube, I pulled it into my DAW, which is Logic Pro X. That's my DAW of choice. And when I first listened to it, I realized that it was like a dual mono recording, which most, most phone services or operators utilize when they're recording conversations. And so it was already split between the caller, the dispatch, and the callers in the background. And so that's what made it easy for me to isolate it without having to do much to it. So that isolation, when I separated the left channel from the right channel, that just made me be able to really focus on everything that was on the call end. And what I was hearing was I honestly could not believe what I was hearing.
Miss Janetta Brantley, isn't it true this is the same audio that was released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources?
Yes, that is absolutely correct.
Let's listen to it one more time.
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can you all please come? We have a membership. Shut the f*** up! What'd you say? It's coming up. We're just sinking. I don't know. We're going down now. I don't know the phone number. It's either. I think it's. Try that. Everybody was on this phone. I know we have a membership, guaranteed. I don't have the tag on here. It got ripped off. What? No, we do not need that. Let me go look. Where is this? Hey, jump in and pull the plug while you're going. Get out of here. Hello. Okay, what's going on? What's up? Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Hello! Let's go! Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership. Hello! Let's go! David Hart? David Hart? David Hart?
Back to Janetta Brantley joining us tonight, and she shows herself in that video showing what she is doing. What does adding EQ mean, Ms. Brantley?
Adding EQ is basically selecting a certain frequency of the actual sound and either deleting or removing a certain noise, something that's problematic to the ear, deleting that or boosting that. That's literally all EQing is.
What was your process, Janetta? Because I was sitting researching. It was early in the morning, like 5:45 a.m. several days ago, and I was researching the Nolan Wells case, and I saw the transcript as it was being played. And my husband was also up. He said, "What's wrong?" I'm like, if this is real, this changes everything. It changes everything. Because up until that point, it seemed as if Nolan's death could very well have been an accident. If this is real, it changes everything. It's seismic. What was your reaction when you heard these words, Janetta Brantley?
I think at my core, I was in disbelief. I wasn't cleaning it or enhancing it to specifically look for or identify a crime or even point the fingers at anybody. I believe I wanted it to be an accident. I think a lot of us wanted it to be an accident. So when I heard those things, when I heard "Damn it, Bart," that name stood out to me because I hadn't even heard that name before. As I was listening to certain things that stood out to me, I was in disbelief because, again, I'm just an audio engineer. I'm not an investigator, detective, or anything like that. So when I heard a name that I wasn't familiar with, it stood out to me, and that alone made me want to hear what was immediately said after "Damn it, Bart." And so that's why in that process where "Damn it, Bart" came in loud and clear to me, I decided to go over to the next part to hear what the rest of that statement was, which is where you saw me actually create a loop over that part, split that part, and then add a gain, which the gain is boosting the volume overall. And that's pretty much what you saw me do in that actual video. And so to hear, "Damn it, Bart, Nolan's really dead now," that I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
My reaction too, Janetta, because when I first heard it, I thought this has got to be doctored. This can't be real. Don't move. Straight out to veteran trial lawyer Franz Borghardt, a veteran trial lawyer joining us out of the Baton Rouge jurisdiction at Borghardt's law firm. Franz, take off your defense hat just one moment. I have introduced wiretaps many times at trials, which are very hard to get, by the way. And never had one that I believed was doctored at the time because they were taken by law enforcement. This is from a completely independent source with no dog in the fight, no skin in the game. It's from Dispatch at CETO. And if this is real, this blows the case wide up. Now, you saw Janetta Brantley. You've heard her. I have no reason to disbelieve anything she's saying.
So if I'm prosecuting this, I'm worried that I need a witness in 2026 to exclude the possibility that it's either AI generated or doctored, just like you suggested. And I think that she's very credible, but I think we need to go one step further. The other concern I have, Nancy, is if the independent autopsy is showing inconclusive death results, now I really want to see the other autopsy to see, is there trauma to the body? Is there something that happened? These are the concerns I would have as a prosecutor.
Before we talk about obstructions such as allegedly lying or covering something up, you've already mentioned two distinct lines of inquiry. One is that the audio that Janetta Brantley enhanced innocently, I believe, had been already AI or doctored. Okay, let's follow that through to its logical conclusion. You just throw that out there like a stink bomb at the circle. You know what a circle meeting is, right? In the United Methodist Church, all the ladies have circle meetings. Okay. To suggest this was doctored before Janetta got it means it had to have been doctored or AI created by who? The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. No, don't just go, that doesn't work in court, Burkhartz. You can't just throw, that's like the side defense. Some other dude did it. What dude? What are you talking about? So you're saying AI doctored by who? If it's not Janetta, then who? She got it. The same sound that was released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. What? You think they doctored it?
There is nothing normal about this case. And if the
That's not what I asked you. I'm asking you to explain your premise, and you're not doing it.
I said if I were a prosecutor, I would want to be able to establish with expert testimony that what we are listening to is real. And I would want a witness, because I'm telling you, with this case, with as viral as it's been, I'm not disagreeing that it's real. I'm saying I would want to be able to bolster that very credible woman's testimony, and she is very credible. I have no doubt that what we're listening to and what she did is credible. The issue is I don't know if she can go the distance to say,
okay,
right,
got it. She cannot testify as to whether MDMR had enhanced it or doctored it before it was released. But see, the problem is, you would have to ask someone to believe a clerk or an official at the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources doctored this before they released it, to the extent that nobody could understand it until they enhanced it. That's a hell of a doctor job. Okay, so you did that. Then you got into the medical examiner findings. Okay, what was your theory on that? Very quickly.
If he's dead on the boat, how did he die? It should be conclusive. It shouldn't be inconclusive.
Joining us right now, Joseph Scott Morgan, renowned death investigator, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, with a premier criminal pro department and building, author of Blood Beneath My Feet, star of a hit series, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan, and it goes on. Significant, over 10,000 death scenes under his belt. Joe Scott, follow up. I'm not arguing with Burkhartz. Let's learn, if we can, from what he's saying. Jump.
Yeah, so whatever has been the causal factors here has got to marry up with what they were seeing at the scene, and perhaps the audio does fall into this. You know, these statements, And I think that probably from a medical legal perspective, that is the coroner and the medical examiner are going to want to be able to fully appreciate what is being said here from a timeline. This is absent the police's investigation. They're going to try to rule in or rule out what they're seeing presenting on Nolan's remains when they finally did receive them at the state medical examiner's office and that examination began. And this is going to be critical and key, because the causal effects here are going to be critical. We go back to these changes that the second autopsy referred to on the back of the head. Now, the doctor was not able to, at that point in time, even though he did do a thorough, what's referred to as a layered dissection here, he could not establish the causal effects here because the injury or the insult that you see there, this presentation, is compromised by decomposition. So what did the state medical examiner see? My problem is here, Nancy, how was the body treated before or after the first autopsy and the body is transported up to DC? I have questions about this because they're talking about to the degree with which the body was decomposed. The doctor up in DC is seeing significant decomposition. We don't know what they saw in Mississippi, but I do know that you're only talking about and I'm ballparking here, please give me some grace, maybe 48 hours tops before the medical legal authorities have seen the body. So how far degraded is the body to compromise any of this? And this evidence is going to have to be borne out, not just with the physical findings that you see with the unaided eye, but also whatever's going on toxicologically.
I want you to take a careful look at this video we have obtained. Let's see it. Look how tightly everyone is packed in. There were hundreds of people out on Horn Island on July the 4th. What, nobody saw what happened to Nolan Wells? They all just left with him standing there stranded, waving his arms like Gilligan? That did not happen. Now that you're seeing this, what is an innocent explanation? I'm trying to figure that out. Joining me, and I'll circle back to you, Joe Scott, because I got a lot of questions regarding the way he could have died innocently and been left behind, and that sound being true. The sound that Janetta Brantley enhanced. Is there any innocent explanation? Is there a way, as my favorite judge often said, Luther Alverson, it is your duty to make all witnesses speak the truth and impugn perjury to no one. Is there a way that can be done? I don't know that it can. It seems to me that someone is lying. But who? Joining me now, Teslin Figaro, social justice, political commentator, host of the Teslin Figaro podcast. Ms. Figaro, thank you for being with us. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, that's what the family is saying. They don't believe he died by accident. That's the point. That's the reason why Nolan Wells' mom is saying, I don't believe this. I don't believe he died by accident before we had the audio. The audio simply confirms that there are additional questions that needs to be asked. It wasn't just one thing they said in the audio. They said Nolan repeatedly in the audio. They said check his chest in the audio. They said, is he dead in the audio? And also, notice this, Nancy. Did you notice that the operator also said, is anybody breathing? Who says that? What operator says who all is breathing on the boat? So is this all the audio, Nancy? Is there more audio? That's my question.
I want to look specifically, Teslin, at what was said. At one point, we think, you killed him? He's already dead. He's already dead? Is he dead? Yeah, Nolan, OMG, wake up. And as Janetta stated, then she hears a completely different name, Bart. Now, we also hear, and I'm very curious, the phrase, no. Teslin Figaro, was that a nickname of Nolan Wells?
I cannot confirm if that's a nickname of his or not. But what I do know is we heard Nolan. What I do know is we heard check his chest. What I do know is that we said, is he dead? What we do know is we heard screams. There's folks out there suggesting that perhaps they were talking to a seagull or perhaps talking to some random bird that was flying around that's called No-No. There were folks out there that suggested, well, maybe they were talking about the boat. Come on, we got to knock this off, Nancy. We heard what we heard. And so if we were to put this before a jury.
Also, we hear, damn it, Bart, No-No's really dead. Damn it, Bart, No-No's really dead. Repeating it over and over and over. According to reports, his nickname, one of them, is No-No. Back to Tesla and Figaro. What is Nolan's mother's theory about what happened in light of these tapes?
Before we even had the tapes, her theory is, I told my son, I've raised my son just like I've raised my 19-year-old the same way, Nancy, like I'm sure you raise your children. Come back with the people you went with. Her theory has always been that he is a fantastic swimmer, that he is an athlete. Her theory has always been that he did not drown. Her theory has always been that there's something wrong with this picture. Her theory has always been that the fact that, he left his phone and left his keys. Her theory has also always been that he did not just go off with some random stranger and say, guys, don't worry about it, just leave me on an island. Her theory is the same thing before this audio. This audio only confirms what this mother already knew.
The search for Nolan Wells brought together the Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service, and volunteer groups. On July 6th, a National Park Service ranger found Nolan in the water near the northwestern tip of Horn Island. He was identified through dental records, and the Jackson County coroner said there were no immediately obvious signs of physical trauma. In the earliest days, the sheriff's office also said there was no information then suggesting a crime had occurred. Those are the basic facts. Everything else in this case, the interviews, the phone, the disputed timeline, and the viral evidence, has to be measured against them. The most important unresolved period is the roughly 90 minutes between about 3 p.m., when Nolan was reportedly last seen by people in the group, and 4:31 p.m., when GPS data confirms the boat left the island. On a crowded holiday beach, 90 minutes is enough time for countless small conversations and movements that nobody would normally remember precisely. That is why every confident claim about this short window deserves to be examined carefully. According to the friend group's account, the boat developed a bilge pump problem and had to leave urgently. They say Nolan chose to stay behind. But Katie's family's public account points in another direction. It says Nolan led Katie to believe he intended to return to the original boat. Both versions cannot be completely accurate at the same time, and the difference comes down to what happened during those same 90 minutes. That brings us to Warren's interview with Brandon Tatum. Warren is not charged with a crime, and law enforcement has not publicly named him as a suspect. His own account was given voluntarily and publicly, which is why his exact wording has received scrutiny. This is not an accusation. It is a closer look at an inconsistency in a public statement. Early in the interview, Warren was asked about the last time he saw Nolan. His answer was clear: the last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock. A short time later, while describing the group's departure, Warren said Nolan was sitting near the boat and that his friends called for him to get on. That creates the central contradiction. If 3 o'clock was truly the last time Warren saw Nolan, how could he later describe Nolan's specific location at approximately 4:30? Those two statements cannot both be literally accurate. There are at least two possible explanations. Warren may have combined separate memories while describing an emotional and chaotic afternoon. Human memory can become less precise under stress, especially when people repeatedly retell an event after the fact. Or, the timeline may contain a gap that Warren did not clearly explain. We cannot determine which explanation is correct from one recorded interview. What is clear is that Tatum did not stop and ask Warren to reconcile the two statements. That matters because a formal investigative interview has a different purpose from a media conversation. Investigators are expected to return to contradictions and ask the witness to clarify them. The interview with Tatum moved forward instead. The same problem appears when Warren's account is compared with the statement made on Katie's family's behalf. According to that statement, Nolan was talking with Katie and she believed he was heading back toward the boat. She later left safely on another boat. The friend group's account says Nolan decided to remain on the island and continue talking with her. Those are two different descriptions of the same final conversation. Katie's account is also secondhand in the public record because it was communicated through her sister, rather than through a direct on-camera interview with Katie. So it should be treated with that limitation in mind. What she believed Nolan planned to do is not necessarily proof of what happened afterward. There is also a broader issue with memory. People often rebuild timelines after an emotional event, unconsciously filling gaps with what seems logical. Public retelling can make an uncertain memory sound more precise than it originally was. That means Warren's contradiction could be an honest memory error. But it also means investigators should compare his public version with his formal individual interview, and when that information becomes available. The sheriff's office has said witnesses are being interviewed separately as part of the active investigation. That is significant because separate interviews reduce the chance that repeated group discussions will reshape everyone's memory into the same version. If Warren's formal account matches his public account, that matters. If it differs, that matters too. At this point, the public does not have that answer. The case also contains viral evidence that turned out not to support the claims made around it. The second viral claim involved a boat video in which a voice appears to say, "Give me my freaking phone." Ben Crump initially said he believed the voice was Nolan's. Trayson Shepard later told ABC News that the voice was his and that the argument involved a separate incident. Crump acknowledged the conflicting accounts and said audio experts would be used to determine the voice. Now consider Nolan's phone. According to the family, the phone remained with friends after they left the island and was later located through Life 360. When the family reviewed it, they said Snapchat content from July 4th was missing even though they checked before the normal expiration period. That raised questions about whether material had been deleted or was otherwise unaccounted for. But that allegation has not been independently confirmed as a forensic finding. One friend told ABC News that leaving phones on the boat while swimming was normal because the group wanted to protect them from saltwater, and that Nolan's was one of roughly 15 phones left there. Connectivity problems on a remote island could also affect Snapchat content. The most important development is that the family and investigators agreed to a joint, simultaneous inspection of Nolan's phone. Both sides can examine the same data through the same process. That should make it easier to determine whether anything was actually deleted, whether the missing content has a technical explanation, and what the device can tell investigators about Nolan's final hours. The medical evidence is equally important, and it is still incomplete. Mississippi conducted an initial autopsy, but the full findings and toxicology were still pending at the time covered by this script. The family also arranged an independent autopsy in Washington, D.C., performed by a pathologist outside Mississippi. That examination was partly funded by Colin Kaepernick, while funeral costs were covered by Tyler Perry, according to the family's legal team. The independent results had also not been publicly released. Forensic pathology in a water-related death is not simply a matter of looking for water in the lungs. Examiners consider possible drowning findings, internal and external trauma, environmental changes, and toxicology. Water exposure and decomposition can complicate interpretation, and laboratory testing takes time. That is why the final reports matter far more than confident speculation from social media. There is also the planned grand jury presentation. The district attorney has said the case will be presented after the sheriff's investigation is complete. A grand jury referral is not the same as criminal charges. It means evidence can be presented to determine whether probable cause exists for an indictment. The sheriff's public language has also evolved. Early on, his office said there was no information suggesting a crime had occurred. Since then, officials have confirmed an active investigation, individual witness interviews, contact with the FBI, and the use of additional forensic resources. That does not mean authorities have announced that a crime occurred. It means the investigation has become broader and more detailed as more information has come in. Nolan's best friend, Javon Williams, has provided another piece of context. Williams said Nolan had never been someone who stayed behind when his friends left after arriving together. He described that as a long-standing pattern. Nolan's parents have also said they raised him with the rule that if he went somewhere with a group, he stayed with that group. Then there is the GPS data. The boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. and did not immediately return directly to its original dock. The data shows additional movement, including travel toward Fort Bayou, before the boat eventually returned. Later that evening it went to a boat launch and was apparently towed overland to the owner's residence. The broader context of the case has also generated intense public debate, including arguments about race. Nolan was one of relatively few black attendees in the larger group on Horn Island. Reverend Al Sharpton and Ben Crump have said the family is not claiming race explains what happened, while also saying it should not automatically be dismissed as a factor worth examining. That is different from accusing a specific person of acting because of race. So where does the case actually stand? The documented facts are these. Nolan was 18 and went to Horn Island with friends on July 4th. GPS data confirms the boat's movements, including its departure from the island at 4:31. A distress call was made after the boat experienced a bilge pump problem. A Coast Guard call came later that night. Nolan was reported missing, and his remains were recovered by a National Park Service ranger on July 6th. Identification was made through dental records, and no immediately obvious physical trauma was reported. Both state and independent autopsy findings remained pending. The joint phone inspection had been agreed to. The sheriff's investigation remained active, and the district attorney planned to present the case to a grand jury after the investigation was completed. The disputed issues are just as important. Did Nolan intend to return to the original boat, as Katie's family statement suggested, or did he choose to stay behind, as the friend group said? Was the voice in the viral confrontation video Nolan's or Trayson Shepard's? And why did Warren say the last time he saw Nolan was 3 o'clock, then later describe Nolan's position at 4:30? The unknowns are even bigger. The public still does not have the final cause and manner of death. We do not know what the phone examination will show. We do not know what evidence a grand jury may eventually hear. And we do not know whether Warren's conflicting statements reflect ordinary memory error or something investigators will need to examine more closely. And that brings us back to the title question. What was the critical mistake that many people missed? It was not a confession. It was not proof that Warren caused anything. The mistake was that the interview contained a contradiction that was never resolved. Warren said his last sight of Nolan was at 3 o'clock, then described Nolan's specific location at the boat around 4:30. The interviewer did not stop and ask him to reconcile those two statements. That is a legitimate reason for investigators to ask the question again in a formal setting. It is not, by itself, proof that Warren was hiding something, and it certainly is not proof that anyone caused Nolan's death. That distinction matters because every person connected to this case is living with the consequences of what is said online. Warren, Katie, Trayson Shepard, Javon Williams, and the rest of the friend group are young people facing intense public scrutiny while also dealing with the loss of a friend. Nolan's parents are grieving their son while waiting for answers. None of that erases the documented questions. But those questions should be investigated without turning uncertainty into accusation. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was a son, a friend, and a person whose life was much bigger than the unanswered questions now surrounding his final day. The investigation will eventually have to separate what can be proven from what can only be suspected. Until then, the most responsible thing we can do is keep the categories clear. What is confirmed, what is disputed, and what is still unknown. Rest easy, Nolan. And for everyone following this case, the goal should not be the fastest theory or the most dramatic headline. It should be the truth, whatever that truth ultimately turns out to be. The facts matter,